Okay, hi. Today we're going to be doing my March reading wrap-up. In the month of March, I read 8 books, but I reduced my physical TBR by 12 books, and that is mainly because I went through my shelves and I saw that there were some books that I knew I was no longer interested in, so I got rid of, I think, 5 books, and then some of the books I had read from the library. We're just going to go in chronological order of when I read them. So the first book I read is called What's Your Pronoun by Dennis Barron. This is written more recently in the times where pronouns have come up in conversation on the social level and also on the political level. And I think that what this kind of book seeks to achieve is the historical context of pronouns and different types of pronouns and going beyond like the he, she binary. So while this book touches on the fact that not all languages use gendered pronouns, it is very much just talking about English and taking from historical context in the US and the UK. The book itself, while in the introduction it says that it will help guide you to a determination of what your pronouns might be, it's never actually a how-to as much as it is the history of pronouns. And for me, that's okay. With nonfiction, I always try to see when they state what they're in their introduction chapter, like what the book is going to be about, if it actually seeks to achieve that aim. And I think that in the historic context, it hit the aim, but in that context, it didn't. For me, it was like I learned a lot of really interesting facts. It was very telling to see how the pronoun conversation has come up over the years many times, and every time it acts as though it's the first time that we're having the conversation about pronouns. A lot of the context isn't like people self-identifying pronouns as much as it is what to use for like the singular global or instead of saying he or she, they, the controversy around using they as a singular. And a lot of this context is through the means of law and how law has been interpreted over time, especially in terms of it saying he and when it pertained to he or she, or when it pertained just to he, and kind of like the genderedness around when you could collectively use a term. It also talks about how people like to say that they is not appropriate in a singular sense, but you can see through time that people use they rather frequently. And the author quoted many well-known authors' books from 1800s that did use they in contexts. And then it talked about a lot of other like pronouns that people kind of coined and brought forward and were recoined in like times in the future when the pronoun conversation came up again. The book didn't really touch on this, but I think it would have been interesting to take note of like the racial and cultural implications of like proper grammar in use of pronouns, because that does come up contextually now sometimes. But overall, I thought it was a really informative read, and I would recommend it for anyone who wants to have like some background on pronouns when having that conversation in a current modern setting. This book felt very well researched. Okay, the next book I read, I already talked about on my channel. I made a video dedicated to it. It is Bad Blood by Carryrou. So this, again, is another nonfiction. It's about a woman who dropped out of Stanford, started a company around patented technology in the Silicon Valley that was supposed to be able to take a drop of blood and be able to perform hundreds of tests using that small amount of blood. So that would put it in the med device field. And it's just all of the nonsense and craziness about this, like people working for the company, how people were treated at the company, like the huge big name investors that put tons of money into the company, companies like Walgreens that worked with them when they never had a true technology that ever worked. And it was all really just a huge lie. And this came to light in, I think, 2015 when Carryrou, the author, wrote an investigative journalist piece in the Wall Street Journal. And then he wrote a book afterwards about it and filled in some more of the details of what happened then and also what happened after and his involvement in this. And it was just so fascinating. I absolutely loved it. There's so many different readers that would feel an itch satisfied by reading this book. I think if you're a mystery reader, you would enjoy this. If you like nonfiction or true crime, you would enjoy this. If you like reading about espionage, you would enjoy this. There's just, I could recommend this book to everyone and feel satisfied that they would at least find it enjoyable or entertaining. And then just like the mind-blowing aspect that everything that you're reading actually happened in the rather recent past. So I highly recommend this book. It's definitely one of my favorite reads of 2022 so far. Okay, the next thing I finished was Milk, Blood, Heat by Dantiel Moniz. This is a short story collection. It is quite short, and I quite enjoyed this one as well. It's kind of about people in moments in time, like normal people. They were all very contemporary, and it was about people in moments of time and like at the crux of something specific happening in their lives, something maybe traumatic, something that just changes the way their life looks in some capacity, the relationships surrounding that. There are multiple that were centered around adults or young adults, and there were quite a number varied, like spliced in there that had child protagonists, which doesn't always work for me with narration, but this was from a third-person perspective for the most part, and not any of them stand out to be like the best short story I've ever read of all time, but they all left me feeling a way afterwards. Like they all kind of left me with an emotion to settle with when I was done with them, which is what I want a short story to accomplish. And it's a very short collection, so I also recommend that if you like short stories. Okay, the next one I read was Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. Okay, so this is a very short horror novella. I read it in basically a sitting, and it is about 4 Chicana women who are just turned like 18 or 19 and are kind of messing around, like performing a seance, and then they call down a supernatural being. If you've watched horror movies, or if you like the horror movie genre, you've probably watched B-rated horror films where it's just like kind of unbelievable and like maybe the acting isn't the best in the world, and like you can very much tell it's a film, like it was low budget, but you like it anyway. That was the vibe of this book. It felt like I was reading the book form of a B-rated horror film. And while I do enjoy a B-rated horror film on occasion, I prefer them as movies than I do as books. So it was fine, but I don't think I would necessarily recommend it. It's so short that I wouldn't really push someone not to read it. But it was a little bit nonsensical. It was really fucking weird. There's plot lines that like don't come to fruition. No one's having true character arcs. People just like snap change. It was something. The next book I read was Babysitter at Rest by Jen George. So I picked this up because of the cover. It just caught my eye, and it is a short story collection that has 4 longer short stories in them. And the first one I really loved. It was very satirical, like tongue-in-cheek about like life and stuff and society and like the accumulation of status through the stuff that you own. Just how it was told was really innovative. That's the word. It was very innovative. So I really enjoyed the first one. And then the last 3 kind of like glided on the same type of satirical look at society and that energy, but left a bit to be desired. So for a short story collection, it fell a bit flat for me, but I really liked the first one, which was called, let me check, it was called The Guide. All of them kind of read as this like frank look at society and humanity and the odd social constructs that we have to navigate, which sounds interesting. Like when I say that, it sounds like something I would want to read, but for some reason I just felt very disconnected from the 3 later stories. Okay, and then the next one I read was Kintu. This is by Jeniffer Nansubuga Makumbi. I was very much looking forward to this. It is a historic fiction novel that takes place in Uganda. I think that where this one missed for me was in my expectations of what the book was going to be based on how it started. So you get like a chapter in 2004, and then it jumps straight into the 1700s. This kingdom in Uganda that isn't called Uganda at the time, that isn't really at this point touched by colonialism and Western thought. And I loved that section. I found it so interesting. I was invested in all of the characters, and I thought that I was kind of going to see from the 1700s moving forward to 2004, the family dynamics and the changes over time, which I was going to totally be there for. But that is not what happened. The actual structure of the book is that you get that 1700 section for ancestral context, and then the book really is framed around something happening in 2004. So you do, in each section of the book, see people on a certain day in 2004, and then you might jump back to the 60s or like the 1960s or the 1980s or some other time to get context of their life and how their ancestors that you saw from the 1700s impact who they are now. And you kind of see that process over and over again with different characters and in different capacities. And then you have some sort of resolution event in 2004 that brings all the storylines together. I liked it. I thought it was well executed, but I kind of just wanted it to be something else, which isn't necessarily fair to the book. But I think that I do this quite a bit with like family sagas or multi-generational novels, where I really think it's going to be something like Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, where it is like it's taking you chronologically through time, which isn't typically what I get, and I I set myself up for failure with these types of books. So I think, like, as a historical fiction novel, it is really strong. It's long, though, so that's something to keep in mind. It is quite a thick book, and I do feel like you might not have needed every single section to accomplish what the author was trying to get to in the end. But I would, if it's on your reading list, I would still like recommend you trying it. But if you're like me and you love the first part and then you get into the second part and it starts to drag, I don't necessarily think that the reward of finishing the book is quite there. And then I am chugging along on a fantasy series I've been reading for a while now, which is the Shattered Sands series by Bradley P. Beaulieu. I finished the third book in this series, which is a 6-book long series, and I finished 2 of the novellas. One of them I technically finished at the beginning of April, and I still have no opinions on if I would recommend this series. One thing that I'm finding interesting is that I tend to not like, on average, I tend to not like how men write women as much as I like how women write women. But what I find interesting in this series is that I actually prefer all of his female characters to his male ones. Like, his male ones drive me crazy. They are very annoying and, like, headstrong in, like, the wrong ways and convenient plot-wise at times. But I'm still very intrigued by the world. It is very expansive. There are gods. There are many kings in one kingdom that are all old and like kind of immortal. There is blood magic. There's obviously other types of magic that we're seeing present, and there's multiple storylines from multiple kingdoms. So there's a lot going on. If you like fantasy that is like much more like kind of Game of Thrones style, it's not as expansive as Game of Thrones in character, in universe, or in detail, but it does have more of that energy about it, where you are kind of bouncing between quite a number of characters. Those are all the books I read in March. Let me know if you've read any of these and enjoyed them, and how your March reading went, or how much you're looking forward to your April reading. And that is all I got. So until next time, happy reading.